Hello. To start this demo, we will take a quick look at a sample cybersecurity application being used by a fictional company. Developers have used the Logi Composer development platform to embed analytics to help them meet their delivery timelines without compromising end-user functionality. Now, I could spend the next hour or so going over all this functionality, but as it's similar to that of other business intelligence tools, I'll only spend the next 5 minutes or so on this. Instead, most of the demo will focus on the unique differentiators of Logi Composer. During the demo, we will role-play two personas, the two you most care about, namely that of your end users and your developers. So let's log in as an end user. So, here you see an out-of-the-box visualization seamlessly embedded into the application. It provides the typical interactivity you'd expect from a business intelligence tool. So, for example, I can select Catherine here and see that blocked emails are trending upwards, indeed almost doubling over the past month. This particular application also includes an embedded custom visualization that inherits all of Composer's interactivity. So, for example, I can see which filters are currently applied, and if desired, I can modify them. I can also gain further insight by drilling into the underlying detail. Now, in addition to individual visualizations, entire dashboards can be embedded. These dashboards benefit from the highest levels of interactivity, such as being able to easily filter across all visualizations based on a selection. So I can explore spoofing types of threat a little further. And having done so, I can clearly see that the occurrence of this type of threat is increasing, and that it's perceived to be a relatively severe type of cyber attack. To support custom workflows, Logi Composer allows for easy two-way communication between the hosting application and the embedded components. So on this example, these three visualizations come from Composer, with the rest of the page belonging to the hosting application. I can drive change and communicate from the hosting application to the embedded content. So, for example, clicking on spoofing here, it updates the three visualizations. And the reverse is true as well. By clicking on the embedded content, so for example, clicking on the map, it updates the parent application. Composer also fully supports security and personalization. So as Chief Information Security Officer, Brian here can see all the data. But if I log in as somebody else, for example, John, then his view is automatically limited to his direct employees. And furthermore, the visualization reflects his personal preferences. So in this case, John prefers a donut style chart. And the interactivity allowed reflects his skill level. In other words, Logi adapts to the security requirements of your underlying data and the preferences and skills of your end users. So that was a very fast tour of the user experience. You saw data interactivity, full communication with the hosting application, and sophisticated personalization. I went quickly because these are common features of any decent embedded solution, and Logi Composer clearly has these covered. So let's switch persona to that of a developer and start using Logi Composer. I'll incorporate up to the minute stream data, make a new dashboard, and embed it in the cybersecurity application. So this is the Logi Composer homepage, and it's been designed to streamline the development workflow. So here you can make connections, set up data sources to define a metadata abstraction layer to power dashboards and self-service, create powerful reusable visuals, and create highly interactive dashboards. So just looking at data connections, the data connections store configuration details for certain types of data source. So for example, here you can see configuration details for Postgres and Solr data sources that have already been defined. Today we're going to use an upload API to add a real-time data stream so we can start by directly defining the data source. So I'm going to choose to work with an upload API, and I'll give it a name, just use my initials, append RTS for real-time source to the end. In the sampling tab here, we get to define the format of the data. We can either type a JSON structure or conveniently upload an existing data structure. And by previewing, we get to see that data structure. The Fields tab here allows us to perform some light data prep. So I can change field names, for example, change data types, perhaps the granularity of this time field here. We can also create calculated columns at this stage. The API Endpoints tab is of particular interest. Instead of hiding API endpoints to manipulate the data source further, we understand we work with developers, so we expose this directly in the data source creation process. And lastly, a set of global defaults for all visualizations supported by the data source can be configured. So to enable the real-time data to stream in, we can enable live mode and adjust the refresh rate, and also define the time period. We can also control which visualizations the data source supports. So for example, a box plot may not be necessary. So in this particular case, it can be removed. Finally, we can control the default settings of each visualization. For example, control how the data will initially be grouped and which metric will initially be shown. Although Logi sets some reasonable initial defaults, only you understand how your customers are most likely to view and manipulate the data. So for a bar chart here, perhaps we'll group this by employee and adjust the metric to be score. By setting these visualization defaults, it helps provide consistency and simplifies the end user experience, giving your software team ultimate control. Now we have our source defined, we can go to the library and make a dashboard. The developers can quickly create a dashboard without having to write any code. So I get to choose a data source, and then choose a supporting visualization. And I can quickly repeat that process as well, look to add further visualizations in. So a tree map perhaps. So perfect. The real-time data is already streaming in, and within seconds we've built the general layout of our initial dashboard. So now it's time to make some adjustments. So for our bar chart here, perhaps I want this to be grouped by department. And our tree map here, let's group that by threat, for example. So now we have a modern looking dashboard, but we also want to offer powerful interactivity so end users can make decisions for themselves. Unfortunately, Logi Composer provides full interactivity out of the box. So as an example of that, we can drill into the details very easily. Out of the box interactivity saves time for developers, but we also want to maintain control and tailor the user experience. So to do that, on a per visualization basis, we can choose to edit a visualization. And looking at these interactivity controls here, these granular controls allow you to define the level of self-service and dashboard interactivity available. They allow developers to effectively put up guardrails and tune the experience to the skill level of your end users. So interactivity is controlled, as I was saying, on a per chart basis. So for the bar chart here, perhaps we want to restrict the radial menu so that perhaps key sets and actions and links are turned off. And then for our tree map here, maybe I want to only enable an end user to look at the details. Besides the radial menu, all aspects of end user interactivity can be controlled. So this includes data interactivity and whether or not the user can change visualization settings. So for our tree map here, perhaps I want to limit this purely to being able to sort. So now we've built an example dashboard. Let's save our work and look at how this can be embedded into an application. So when it comes to embedding, we make it really simple. This embed button generates an embed snippet that can be included in a parent application to embed the dashboard. It's pure JavaScript API code with no iframe. And most applications go a step further, however, and use this same API to query the library and programmatically add newly created content into the host application. Indeed, our sample application works in the same way. So let's log back into the cybersecurity application as an end user and see the newly created dashboard. We'll highlight how your end user will be empowered with self-service analytics, but within the safe sandbox your software team just created. So, as you can see, the dashboard we created has been dynamically added to the application. Let's open it. So Brian can see the data streaming in. Also notice that the granular controls on the user experience as tailored by the software team are enforced here. So for example, on the tree map, you can only view details, but on the bar chart, much more interactivity and functionality is available. The developers also tailored the interaction on the tree map to limit regrouping, so I can't change that here. But we're able to do that still for the bar chart, so we could group this by employee rather than department. Brian is in the sandbox, but is still empowered to do self-service analysis. We'll explore everything from changing and configuring visualizations to adding new charts to ultimately creating a dashboard from scratch. So Logi Composer can allow an end user to easily view their data differently. Brian can start by choosing to edit visual. Maybe Brian prefers horizontal bars, so we can easily configure that here. And also perhaps he wants to see a reference line to reflect the level of severity in some way. So again, this can easily be added. Maybe we'll increase that by 1,000 or so, look. So having done that, next let's see how Brian can add additional content. Perhaps Brian wants to determine if country affects the cyber attacks in some way. So to do so, he could search our reusable visual gallery for an appropriate visual. And having done that, look, we can just resize this a little, make it look nice. So sometimes end users don't like anything you've created for them, and Brian happens to be one of these users. But fortunately, he can create his own dashboard from scratch. So the developers have embedded the entire dashboard creation workflow into the application. So by Clicking this plus button over here, Brian can create his own dashboard. Now, as part of the process, perhaps Brian wants to work with an historical data set. And view that data by country. And next, he can choose to add another visual. Perhaps visualize the different types of threat and associated proportions. And finally, if he wants to see detailed country data, he can add a pivot table. So you've seen how Logi Composer provides your end users with a flexible and easy embedded self-service experience, yet your developers still enjoy precise control over this experience. Throughout this demo, the Logi Z engine has been behind the scenes. It streamed in the data, controlled the interactivity, and made the visuals possible. But now I'd like to focus on some truly differentiating benefits of the Z engine and smart data connectors. Let's say Brian wants to learn a little more about the cyber attacks by looking at the keywords associated with them. Email keyword data is stored in a modern big data source that might typically require a special request to integrate, or worse, might prompt your end user to extract the data and analyze it outside of your control. With Logi Composer and the innovations in the Z engine, Brian can stay within your application and do it himself using the same self-service methods he's already learned. So Brian can work with his existing dashboard. And as before, we get to add new content. This time I'm going to choose a different data source. And this is a big data source. And as such, the Logi Z engine takes a unique approach to working with the data. It leverages a proprietary technology we call data sharpening. And this enables the end user to see the shape of the data as it renders and even take action before, if they so wish. Another powerful capability of the Z engine is that it allows an end user to perform analysis across multiple data sets. So even though the email keywords and the real-time data are coming from different sources, we can logically link them. So for example, we have country data in both data sets here. Now we can analyze the combined data. For example, we can view this bar chart by country. And having done that, then filter the entire dashboard by a chosen country. So for example, Russia here. You'll notice the entire dashboard now reflects just the selected country's information. Lastly, these email keywords are stored in Solr, which is a search-based big data source. And as such, the smart data connectors can take advantage of some of the unique source-specific capabilities, such as keyword searches and facets. For example, we could look for all the email keyword data containing the word money. So you've seen the Z engine stream in real-time data, provide data sharpening, join disparate data sources, and with search, surface some unique underlying functionality of your data architecture. These capabilities not only empower your developers, but also your end users. So let's take a look at the Logi Composer architecture. The Logi Composer architecture is built from the ground up with containerized cloud deployment in mind. Each green icon is a microservice that can scale horizontally. They can be dynamically instantiated based on load to meet your performance and availability targets, or independently brought down when not needed to reduce cost. The smart data connectors are specifically designed to leverage the unique capabilities of each storage technology. For example, you saw how the solar connector enabled search-based analytics and data sharpening. The Z-engine uses push-down processing through these connectors to maximize the value of your existing data architecture. And lastly, these microservices expose the strength of our embedding API through a series of RESTful services. In fact, everything you've seen today, including our own interfaces, has been built using these services. And we ship Logi Composer with Swagger installed. So all API calls are documented and made available here, and you can use it to explore some of the capabilities. So here you can see APIs for accounts and actions, and attributes and branding and connections and currency as well. And one service endpoint that I'd like to call out is actually our customization API. And this allows the developer to completely customize the interface through themes. So themes let you change almost everything about the look and feel of the embedded content. And we can actually call this API right here to get a list of themes available. And having made that call, we can see the themes here. And of course, you can make your own themes too. Now, the cyber security application uses the same API call to activate its theme. In summary, you've seen our end user interface and how easy it is to configure new sources and author new visualizations and dashboards. We can empower your customers to modify these dashboards through embedded self-service, even against what would normally be complex sources, freeing up your development team. And lastly, how we enable performance and availability while still giving you the APIs to have the flexibility you need through our modern architecture.